Hey everyone, I wanted to go over the new and exciting news that we got regarding not Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, but instead Monster Hunter Paradise, which seems to be the next mainline, presumably mainline title set to release in the Monster Hunter universe. So essentially all this information came about in the most bizarre way possible as people begun to look into Discord of all things, bizarrely enough, and they found out some details in the Discord Nitro available gifts section. Now this is going to be a little bit complicated if you don't necessarily mess around with Discord all that much, but essentially Discord of course is a platform for chatting and all that kind of things. Nitro is a thing of like a service that you can pay for at whatever the cost may be, a month or a year. I think it's like $60 a year. And you're essentially are paying for being able to use emojis and stuff like that in different Discord and different channels for you to be able to just use those emojis and a couple of other free extra goodies. One of those things is the potential to receive gifts essentially from like different games and different companies and whatever Discord you are a member of. And in one of these places, essentially someone messed around with the settings enough to find that there's an available gifts tab for a game, clearly unannounced game called Monster Hunter Paradise. It does mention that if you go live and stream it for 15 minutes or stream anything for 15 minutes, you're going to unlock a game code for Monster Hunter Paradise for any platform. So all of that is just weird, confusing stuff that you don't necessarily have to worry about. All that it says is that there's this potential title of a Monster Hunter Paradise game in the works. Now, of course, the game has been unrevealed, and it's supposed to be coming to Xbox and PlayStation consoles. It doesn't say PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series S, Xbox Series X. It just says PlayStation and or Xbox. So this has led a lot of people to speculate that if it's just coming to Xbox and PlayStation, this is most likely Monster Hunter World 2, Monster Hunter 6, whichever title we have been expecting them to call it. World 2 was most likely the one, but now we know that it's most likely going to be Monster Hunter Paradise. Now let's make this extremely clear. There is no trailer. We don't have screenshots. We don't know what monsters are new. We don't know if Lagiacrus is returning. For God's sakes, Lagiacrus, please come back. You know, we don't know any of those things yet. This is very early on, and as people are looking into this stuff, you know, most likely more things are going to come out in the future. So for now, we do know that it's coming to Xbox and PlayStation. I think the real interesting thing would be if they are going to make it a cross-platform title, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, Xbox Series X. That would be a little bit of a disappointment to a lot of people. If you watch anything like Digital Foundry, for example, you know that, developers have been opting into just releasing games in last generation consoles to just make up the profits, since there aren't that many Series X's, PS5s, Series S's out in the market just yet, and they just keep releasing PS4, Xbox One games to just make up on the sales. And just visually and aesthetically and features wise, these games are not as good essentially as they could possibly be. Another thing you're going to notice is that they don't mention anything about a PC version of the game at all. We have no details as to that. If it's probably going to be like World, then it's most likely the PC version is going to launch after the consoles versions of the game, which is going to be a bummer to some of those PC players who got really happy that Sunbreak basically launched day and date as the Nintendo Switch version. That is the way that it should be going forward, where PC gets the game day one as any console version. And this is coming from a non-big PC player, although I just recently bought a Steam Deck, so maybe I will eventually become one, because it's almost inevitable since every game is coming to PC regardless of what console it's on. And of course, the last outlier that we're going to see when it comes to the consoles is the fact that it doesn't mention Nintendo Switch at all. This is not necessarily much of a surprise. I went over multiple developer interviews where even director Suzuki straight up mentioned that they tried to get Monster Hunter World to run on the Nintendo Switch just to see if they could actually get some of those feature sets to run on the Switch, and they could, but it wasn't in an acceptable frame rate, and basically features had to be called back, like monster movements and stuff like that. This is why like the skeletons and the way that the actual monsters move and rise are more limited than they were in Monster Hunter World. Not just the visual details of like textures and stuff, but the actual movement of the monsters has been called back severely to be able to run on the Switch. So, this is just something that is by nature as the console is severely limited, graphics wise. Does this actually mean that the game will never release on a Nintendo Switch console? We don't know, because Nintendo still has to quote-unquote reveal the Super Nintendo Switch, the Switch Pro, the Switch 2, whatever that thing is going to end up being called. If that does end up getting revealed at some point in 2023, 2024, there's a potential that Monster Hunter Paradise could eventually make its way there. Obviously, Sunbreak being the second best-selling game for Capcom ever, Monster Hunter Rise and Sunbreak together are just killing it sales-wise. Not as good as World and Iceborne, which is the best-selling game for Capcom. Keep that in mind. World and Iceborne sold more copies than any other game for Capcom ever. That includes Street Fighter, that includes Resident Evil, that includes Mega Man, that includes Devil May Cry. Any big franchise you can think for Capcom, World and Iceborne outsold those games by miles. It's just the best-selling game, and now Rise and Sunbreak are the second best-selling game for Capcom's history. The only real outlier here is Street Fighter 2, which is available in multiple, pretty much every game since 90 or whatever it is, and multiple consoles, different versions of it. So it is technically the best-selling game, but it's not one version of it, it's just multiple versions of it. So yeah, that's what we have right now, Monster Hunter Paradise, potentially being World and or Monster Hunter 6. Now that also leaves a lot of discussion when it comes to just the timetable for the release of this game. Now let's make this extremely clear. Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak is going to be getting DLC all the way up to July of 2023. We know that because just about every single Monster Hunter game gets support for about a year's worth. Rise was just literally 1 year, to the point that they even made a commemorative quest saying a year later, hey, remember last year, etc, etc. So it was like recalling back the demo that we had back on Monster Hunter Rise. So Sunbreak is not going to be any different. We know we have 4 free title updates. One of them is presumably going to be in early 2023, and the developers have alluded to the possibility of more free title updates heading into later into 2023, presumably spring and or summer. So if this game is real, it's most likely going to end up getting revealed at some point at E3, maybe next year. We finally get a first look at it, kind of like when we did with World. I believe it was in a PlayStation Direct or presentation or whatever it was. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. And it didn't look great. I remember the first time that we saw World, it didn't look great. And then the next summer when they showed it again, it finally started to look like, oh yeah, this actually looks better. But we went an entire year with basically just what, 2 minutes of actual trailer, and it didn't necessarily look all that impressive. So Monster Hunter Paradise most likely gets revealed at next E3. There will be an E3 next year, so we most likely end up seeing it there. They're not going to showcase this game as Sunbreak is still getting free title updates. They are not going to do that. Capcom knows better. They've done this in the past. They're not going to do that at any point in time. And then when it comes to the actual release date, well, this game is not really going to release next year, late next year, I should say. Most likely it's going to be early 2024. So, when we're saying, hey, let's get excited for the next Monster Hunter game, well, let's remember the quote-unquote last Monster Hunter game just released a month ago. So they're not going to release this game anytime soon. Another thing that I don't want to necessarily discount is the fact that this could be potentially a mobile game. And the reason why I say that is that I was recently speaking to a marketing director regarding the Tap presentation. If you probably don't necessarily know about this, they recently had a presentation for upcoming reveals and games for mobile devices in Japan. And basically one of the things that we took away from that is that, man, there are some really good visually stunning looking mobile games that are set to release very soon in the upcoming year or so in Japan. And of course, they pretty much look like console games now with the power of modern phones. But, they still have the weird gacha mechanics, free-to-play mechanics, all that grimy, nasty stuff. But they still look pretty damn impressive for what they actually are. And one of those things just kind of kept bugging me in the back of the head. It was like, Capcom has already done mobile games for Monster Hunter. This is not going to be the first time that they could potentially do that. But they've never potentially been able to put a fully fledged Monster Hunter game on a mobile device. They always have had some sort of gimmick, some sort of limited controls and stuff like that. Well, what's stopping them from actually being able to put a game like Rise or Sunbreak or something similar, into a mobile device? Basically just reskin Rise, reskin Sunbreak, call it Paradise, and put it on mobile devices, free to play with all the gacha, all the skins, all the purchasable DLC, all the stuff that they could get away with that they cannot do on consoles. So it's something that, of course, it always kind of like in the back of my head, like whenever there's a big franchise, you know, available on consoles that hasn't necessarily made a move to mobile just yet, you know, wait for it, because it's almost pending. It's almost inevitable. People are not really paying attention to how big mobile has gotten in the past 5 years and how profitable it is. And that's what these companies care about, profits. So, you know, keep that in mind. Capcom always keeps talking about weird things. They're not to the level of Square Enix where they're talking about NFTs, but Capcom is always willing to do these weird things. And remember, they're not going to do another PC-centric, you know, online-focused Monster Hunter game like they did with Frontiers, or G for that matter. They're just not doing that anymore. So mobile devices most likely are going to be the way forward. And it wouldn't surprise me if at the very least, whatever a future version of a game like this ends up getting a mobile version as well. And they just decide to skip over Switch and maybe even PC entirely to cater to PlayStation, maybe even Xbox, and of course, mobile devices as well. But that's about all the information that we have. I know it was like a lot of speculation, but ultimately, we have a name, we have consoles, and we don't really have much else. So, you know, we're just gonna have to wait and see what this ends up being in the near future, or most likely next summer at E3. If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.